Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
I was over in Teams.
Sorry about the delay. There were a few of us that somehow clicked a Teams link and were in it together waiting on the rest of you. So then we realized we were in the wrong place. So
Mm-hmm.
give us 1 second to get our lives in order.
I saw that link come up, that notice come up, but I chose to ignore it.
Yeah, well, right. I would have done that too, because normally I start these if Keisha's not around. But when I saw, I don't know if it was Colleen or Ricky that had started the meeting, I said, oh, let me just join, and didn't realize I was joining Teams. So welcome everyone. Sharita Collin, I know is on the agenda to do the CE evaluation. He is just running 1 to 2 minutes behind. So, and it does not appear that Keisha is here. Um, and I think I said Colleen, but I meant Sharita. So,
No, you say Sharita.
oh, I did. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
At least I think you did. Oof. Good morning, everybody. Colin and I did not get a chance to meet in advance this week. Last week to formulate the agenda. So we were actually texting back and forth this morning. Trying to figure out, yes, we are supposed to discuss the coordinated entry evaluation. We always, after opening our meeting, look at our unsheltered numbers. And I think Nicole sent them to us this morning. Trying to think. And then the only other item that I knew that I wanted us to discuss would be, what did I call it? What did we call it, Anthony? We called it. I'm trying to find it in my notes here. Unsheltered options. And this came up in light of another conversation that the executive committee had earlier in the month of August in relation to an appeal we received. Remember, we said we were going to try to create some space to discuss some unsheltered options. And then Colin mentioned a suggestion from Hart, and then of course we had the
let me look that up real quick.
We had the parking lot suggestion that came out of a project we didn't fund. As it relates to parking. As it relates to additional unsheltered response and supportive services, because we do realize that we have a whole group of people that we don't always get to touch because we're still trying to serve them with limited capacity. So I will officially open this up at 10:40 a.m. And then the other thing is officer vacancies. Did we get in the last meeting? Because I did not get minutes, and I don't know who was supposed to do minutes from our last meeting. Do you, Anthony?
I do. It was me. And I have not done them, but I promise to do them shortly. I forgot that Angela, well, I didn't forget that Angela was out. I think I forgot that I was supposed to do them in light of her being out. And so I will get those to you, by the end of this week, way in advance of the next meeting.
So will we get, is Angela here today? I don't know.
Angela is not here at the
Okay.
moment, but I have not also heard that she will not be coming today.
And do we know if she's gonna continue in that role as secretary? Because normally we do a transition, all of the officers open up. Um, so we open, minutes will be deferred until next month's meeting, is that correct? And we will hopefully at that meeting have the minutes from last month and this month, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then let's go to officer vacancies just really quick, because I don't think it will take a ton of time. If Angela does not decide that she's going to continue to hold the role as secretary, we do need to determine and select a new secretary. Last month I opened up the floor for people to also consider taking on the leadership role of chairing policy and planning if they were so inclined. It does have to be an HSAC member that would take that role, as our current bylaws and the local agreement and things like that support, would have to be someone who holds a seat on HSAC. So right now I'm here, but I just want to bring it to folks' attention that although this is not the performance management committee, we have an issue with performance management where we no longer have a leader in that role either. And so in light of that, I think that we always need to be mindful, and folks, if you're not willing to do it now, be thinking about it as we go through this new year, new cycle, about leadership opportunities. I do not have to sit in this space. I can just be a part of the choir and share my opinions as I would like. So I'm not like trying to be the proprietor or the owner of policy and planning. Just know that.
So Sharita, how would that work if I'm interested?
Are you interested now? Or are you interested in the future?
I mean, not now as in 1044 today, but by next month.
So technically we do it when all the committees roll over. So they roll over between August and September. So we know that like our chair just transitioned for this past month. So it usually comes up then, comes up annually.
Okay.
And so I did, open up the floor on last meeting and said that I would just bring that back up this meeting. But if it's something that if you're not interested in doing it now, then we should be looking at next year. And
well, I mean, when I say I was just joshing a little bit. I was saying now as in like, in this meeting, but I'll put my name in the hat because I missed last month's meeting. I had a conflicting meeting, but I've cleared my Mondays now for policy and planning. So I'll throw my hat and head in the ring. Is that how you say it? Head in the something.
Yep.
For the chair position.
Let's talk. Do you guys want to have a conversation about this now that we have this on the floor? I don't know. Anthony, maybe Colin, myself, and Abner, can we have like an offline conversation to talk about it?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What are we talking about? Sorry, I just jumped in.
we were having a discussion about officers.
Oh, okay.
And I brought back up, I don't know if Angela is gonna continue with secretary, so of course that one was open. And then, as I said I would do last month, I brought to the forefront that I don't have to be the chair of policy and planning. And so Abner was saying it's something that she may be interested in, so maybe can have a conversation about it offline and kind of reconvene.
Sure.
And then have an update next month.
We can do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Abner.
If I could just quickly say, Sharita, I really appreciate your leadership all these years. I think I've been on HSAC 6 years, maybe 7, and you were chairing the whole HSAC for a while, and now you've provided great leadership on this committee, which is a really important committee of HSAC. And I just am so appreciative of your work, and also now of Abena being willing to step up and rearrange her schedule and lead us. It's really vital work. And I just want to thank you both. And Abena, thank you for being willing to take on this additional responsibility. I know you'll be great, as Sharita has been great.
All right, so we will give you guys an update on that next month. How we will proceed with that. The next item on our agenda would be the unsheltered numbers. Do you want to take that, Nicole, or you want me just to read off the email?
I can take that if you need me to.
You have
Okay,
the floor, ma'am.
so right now we have 35 unsheltered families. We have 96 unsheltered singles, which it has jumped from, and it's due to the at-risk numbers have gone down because they have now become unsheltered. So that's why the families and the singles have jumped down on the at-risk, because they are now unsheltered. So, and there's 22 families at risk and 34 singles at risk. So right now we have 187 head of households, and 320 individuals.
This is also typically around the time we start to see the numbers go up.
Yes, because
before they were
the
this horrible number. This is around September, October is where we usually start to see that incline in folks.
Yeah, and the calls have started to incline also.
Now, Nicole, the at-risk that dropped, we know for a fact that the same number of people who dropped are the same number who increased in unsheltered.
I can definitely give you that number. There's been some that were self-resolved, some that were self-resolved, and then the other one was they got help with DSS opening doors to move into a new place, and then the other ones became unsheltered. So I can definitely give you that number.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out if it was a 1-to-1 or if it was like a small percentage of those who had come off the at-risk, because that at-risk dropped. Not everybody who was at risk. It sounds like what you just said is not everybody became literally unsheltered from the at-risk in the last week.
No, I can give you a percentage.
Yeah, a percentage became unsheltered, a percentage got help from DSS, another percentage self-resolved. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, what we do see, Colin, though, in Nicole's numbers are that the total unsheltered increased by 12 and the total at risk decreased by 12. So it's probably not an exact 1-to-1, but it's probably pretty close.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, and our unsheltered come in from a variety of different ways. So it's not always at risk of homelessness. It's sometimes all the other things that lead to people becoming homeless. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, anything they want to add from that report? All right, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the coordinated entry evaluation. Colin, you ready?
Yep, I can do this, and I apologize for not getting this report sent out sooner. We did it, and we were just talking about it in executive committee, and it will be going out. So this will be kind of a first preview for all of you. We will be sending it out to the full HSAC today or tomorrow to allow folks to peruse it and come up with questions and to the full COC, so that questions can be asked. It'll be presented in maybe an abbreviated format at the HSAC meeting, but wanted to walk you through it so you all could see it and if there was anything that you had questions on. So apologies for not getting it sent out sooner. So as many of you will remember, this is a report that we do annually, and 2 years of data for the year ending June 30th, 2023 and the year ending June 30th, 2024. And this is related to coordinated entry. And it's not just entry point coordinated entry, it's the entry point coordinated entry, as well as our coordinated entry looking at how people are exiting into rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing as well. So entry point Durham, I think the big thing here is 3,491 people called during the year ending 2024, which is an increase of 3.2%. Veterans decreased by 29%, which is a good thing. And this is sort of a breakdown of the folks who have called coordinated entry during this calendar year or during this fiscal year. And if you look at the column on the right, you can see that children under 18 has jumped by about not quite 100 people. And we're seeing increase of number of people staying, increased number of people leaving the program. Our veterans, here's where we see veterans have dropped, and number of chronically homeless have statistically stayed flat. Looking at our data elements, kind of a mixed bag here. We are personally identifying info we're doing better on. The current APR does not track client location in the current APR, so that's not there. Disabling condition and destinations are sort of staying where they are. We did want to look at equity and race and ethnicity in our homeless system. So this is just a look at who is experiencing homelessness in Durham. And there is now a new way, the HUD report is not an apples to apples between these years, because now you're able to choose multiple racial groups. So when we run the report, it ends up being, you can be Black / African American / African / white / Latin. And that's one group, which makes this sort of a little bit different than last year. So we're trying to tease this out. But the big thing here, you'll see that people identifying as white dropped percentage-wise and numbers-wise, while people who identify as Black, African American, or African increased increased experienced homelessness in the system by about 1%. It's statistically, it's not a big jump, but it is a number of people who are identifying as Black or African American that are seeing more instances of homelessness in our community, which is concerning. Multiple races stayed statistically flat, even though the number went up. And those who don't know or refused stayed the same. People identifying as Hispanic or Latin dropped from the previous year percentage-wise. And this is the multiracial, more than 2 with 1 being Hispanic Latin. That was not an option in the previous APR. It is in the current one, so that's a new category. When we're looking at chronically homeless, we're seeing our chronically homeless percentages are staying flat, which is, I guess it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that our percentages are staying the same. Here's our veterans numbers of, and keep in mind, chronically homeless here is by self-report. So this is probably an underrepresentation, as not everybody is going to share disabling conditions and be acknowledged a chronic homeless status. So we move into the veterans. We're seeing chronic homeless veterans are dropping as a small percentage, and veteran households here has also dropped, and that's households. Up above is persons. Domestic violence, those who experienced intimate partner violence, 376. This is an increase over last year. And we're also seeing a big increase of recent domestic violence, which is concerning as well. So this is another group of folks who we need to be on the sort of thinking through how and what resources are available for our neighbors who are experiencing intimate partner violence. This is exit destinations from entry point. So 23% of people are exiting into permanent housing, 34% are exiting into temporary setting, and we've got about 41% are exiting to other destinations. And I forget what, off the top of my head, I forget what the other destinations are, but those are things that aren't necessarily categorized. So we're doing a better job of tracking and getting people matched to the most appropriate exit destinations, which is a good thing to see, as these all help us with our overall continuum of care score. We're going to look at emergency shelter, and keep in mind what we were seeing earlier, that we had roughly 77% of the people experiencing homelessness were identifying as Black, African American, or African. And we're seeing 74% of people referred to emergency shelter identifying as Black, African American, or African. So we're pretty close to equity. I mean, statistically, we're within earshot of this being at equity, and roughly 12% of people identifying as white experiencing homelessness. So we're pretty close to operating on an equitable system here. Some of these in previous years would have been captured in other categories. Like I said, there's new categories that are showing up. Permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. We're not seeing a whole lot of movement in rapid rehousing. People are not moving or aren't moving on because of the cost. So you'll see in 2020, the year in 2023, we served 267 people. In 2024, 269. And out of those, only 128 and 104 were new entries. So that's telling us that we've got people staying in rapid rehousing a substantially longer period of time and needing deeper subsidies. So in order to serve more people in here, we're going to have to figure out how to move people on, more expeditiously. And then looking at our PSH and VASH, and this is permanent supportive housing paired with VASH in this, and you'll see we saw a big uptick in this. There were a lot more PSH openings, and VASH had more people served this year. When we look at rapid rehousing, race and ethnicity, we're once again, remember, 12% and 77% for white, Black, or African American. We're operating pretty close to equity here. It's interesting to see that there's a substantially fewer people identifying as white served by rapid rehousing, which is fine because we had more people identifying as white showing up in another category. So we're operating as a system pretty equitably here. And then our permanent supportive housing, once again, slight overrepresentation of people identifying as white as compared to the 12% of the overall population. However, we're still right about at that 77% mark for people identifying as Black or African American in our PSH programs. Some of the reason for the white overrepresentation in PSH is that disabling condition piece that we have talked about for a while in terms of cultural expectations and cultural comfort of getting diagnoses, sharing diagnoses, and being willing to have that done in order to access permanent supportive housing, which requires a disabling condition. So this is kind of it in a nutshell. Is we're operating as a system pretty much at equity, and we're seeing more people calling us, which, as I would like to say, comes from the Common Sense study sponsored by DUH. We've got more people coming in, and Entry Point's doing a great job of navigating them through, and Jeffrey and the PSH and rapid rehousing providers are doing a fantastic job of helping people get coordinated and move through the system in an equitable way. Questions? Like I said, this will get sent out shortly.
Thanks so much, Colin. Any questions before I ask mine? Y'all know I always have some.
I do have a question. With the rapid rehousing or like permanent supportive housing, is there going to be eventually more slots like open, or because of more people coming to Durham and being unsheltered and needing the services, is there going to be any more funding or anything with rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing for them?
It depends on if we can find more money. We've got a fixed amount of emergency solutions grant money from the state and the city plus match. We've got a fixed amount of money from HUD, the COC grant for rapid rehousing. We're hoping we'll have another DV bonus project that'll apply for the COC this year, which in theory would, if it were to be awarded, would open up some more rapid rehousing for households fleeing domestic violence. Absent more money, we'll continue to see, I would say, I don't know that we'll be able to maintain the same numbers of households we've been serving, given the fair market rents for the Durham area have just jumped by about $200 per unit. And the amount of money that comes in from the feds, there are small adjustments that are made to help cover that. But due to rent, the fair market rent jumping substantially more than wages have, the size of the subsidies, I suspect, will continue to increase rather than decrease, requiring folks to perhaps stay in the program longer and require more money. I see, Ryan, your question. Yes, we have asked for money in budget allocations for flexible housing vouchers and to do this from city and county, and have not been successful in getting more funding for anything in the homeless system lately. Well, I take that back. We have been successful. There have been some good things. The county, I think, is putting about $2 million into a project later today. And we've done a lot with what we have. It's just, once you put that money in, it's a recurring commitment, which can be tricky as it gets more expensive rather than less expensive over time.
Right.
The flexible vouchers were also asked with supportive services, which we would be able to create permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing. We'd be able to use it in a variety of different ways. I can send you the memo that we sent, Ryan, so you can sort of see what we asked for. We're about, I think it was about $4 million worth of options.
Says Heidi, can you, well, first of all, it's great to see the equity in our system that you described, Colin, and I'd be interested in knowing from you all who are running the system if you think that the Policy and Planning Committee has made some changes in, the past several years to help with this. I remember we have discussed this, and hopefully some of those policies are contributing to the improved numbers that we see. So that'd be one question. And then another question I have, or comment really, is about it seemed like a very good increase in the number of people being served in permanent supportive housing, but not with rapid rehousing. And what do we need to do there? Besides more funding for rapid rehousing, have we, remind me, I mean, maybe we've spent more emergency solutions grant money on the permanent supportive housing. Maybe the city and the county working with nonprofit partners are doing more work with permanent supportive housing. Should there be a shift? These are some questions I have.
Permanent supportive housing is made up of two pieces. One piece is the COC continuum of care permanent supportive housing, which is HUD funded. Those units typically we have about 1 unit a month on average. Some months there's nothing, some months there's 5. But if you average it out, we usually have about 12 new units a year come on board. We had a little bit more than that in the last year. I don't recall exactly how many we had turnover. And then the other part of the permanent supportive housing that's counted is the HUD VASH program, which is for chronically homeless veterans. That is where we're seeing a lot more traction because those veterans, our veterans will, those vouchers. The other challenge that we're having on the rapid rehousing side is you've got to keep in mind, we had a perfect storm and we're still trying to recruit landlords back to working and taking third-party payments. We had an eviction moratorium, which got operationalized to people didn't pay rent. And that irritated some landlords, and some landlords who had historically worked with us sold to, multinational or outside the area vendors who have decided to change their tenant selection criteria. We as a homeless system, to your question earlier, Commissioner Carter, is we had folks who had historically been prioritized for housing options that weren't appropriate for their level of need, i.e. we would be giving a housing choice voucher to somebody who had been living in the woods for 20 years with no income, severe mental health and severe substance abuse issues, and didn't have appropriate supportive services to ensure the person would be stable. That burned out a bunch of landlords based on our policies and procedures. We also have landlords now who are changing their tenant selection criteria because the market's allowing them to do so, and they don't want to go fight evictions in court. They don't want to have to go deal with the legal system and have and deal with legal aid and the legal system in terms of walking through to get through the eviction process when things go sideways. So there's a whole lot of this perfect storm of what we're doing. So we are in the process of trying to recruit landlords back. We've got the landlord engagement contract with Housing for New Hope that's done a great job of bringing in landlords and sort of recruiting people back. One of our landlords who had been around working with us for a while has said, I've put a pause on taking people from the homeless system for a while. And, and we're working with them and sort of explaining that we've made changes. We're working on this, and we're working to re-engage those relationships. And then on the equity question that you had, yes, we as the coordinated entry, I got to call out Jeff and the team for really thinking through in how do we work through equity and asking questions to ensure that we get the right answers from everybody who's calling in, so that we're better able to prioritize. And in wake of the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling, we've sort of had to go back and sort of take race out of the mix. Not because anybody's told us to do so, but we are trying to ask questions that get to the same answer, without saying, what is your racial category? So we know, for instance, sickle cell anemia is something that is predominantly, I think, maybe only in the African American community. So, is this asking questions about things that disproportionately affect different populations in different ways, or help us to get to the same answers? And Jeff and Anthony and the team have done a really, really good job sort of thinking through, how do we ask the questions in a creative way to get perhaps a better and more complete question or answers, so that we can better match and make sure that we're meeting the needs of those in the community. So I am really proud of the team for being able to keep us at equity, because that's something that's huge. HUD is sort of going on across the country. What are you doing to ensure equity? What are you doing? How is the equity looking? Because there are places where you have the same demographics that we have in our homeless population, and yet you'll see people identifying as white taking up 50% of the resources, even though they're making up fewer than 15% of the overall population experiencing homelessness.
I see Ryan's hand up. Ryan, is your hand up for a new question, or is it just up from before?
It's up for just a quick comment. Thank you. I just wanted to underscore one point, Commissioner Carter, that Colin said, which is, you look at the permanent supportive housing numbers and it certainly looks better than rapid rehousing, but most of that is VASH. I mean, I think, as Colin said, that we only have on average 12 units a year and 1 a month is a big problem for permanent supportive housing. We need a lot more. We're working with neighbors to get them into supportive housing, and it's just months and months, and that's really hard. So I just want that point to be underlined, because it needs a lot more attention, and we haven't had a big increase in the supply over the last 5 or 6 years. So just noting that.
There is an opportunity for, in the continuum of care NOFO, for a permanent supportive housing bonus project. I believe, Anthony, it's about $300,000 is available for a new PSH bonus project. There's no promise that a project would be funded. It's a bonus project, and it depends on how we as a community score overall in a national competition. If we score incredibly well and we have a strong PSH application, it's possible we'd be able to pull in some more permanent supportive housing to our location. It's just a difficult place to be when you're trying to compete for this and need to show that you're having people exit to permanent housing when it's a difficult thing, and it's difficult everywhere.
Okay, so I have a few questions. So thanks, first of all, for sharing that information, and hopefully we'll get that soon so that I can look at it deeper. But one of the things that stood out to me was that there was no data regarding socioeconomic status of these folks that we're serving. And again, the lack of move-in opportunities because of cost. I think we've continually had issues with that, especially in PSH, because a lot of times those people's income doesn't change. Like if they get it, once, and most of the time it's in the form of disability benefits. It's a set, if they don't have any credits, they're going to get SSI 943. That's what it is. And because it's means tested, going to work could jeopardize you losing it, right? So those people typically do not access employment opportunities out of fear that it's not sustainable and that they will lose their benefit. So are we, saying all of that, are we tracking the socioeconomic status of the groups that we are serving in a meaningful way to give us some information about financially where these people sit and what solutions we can put in place, what partnerships that we can reformulate, reestablish, to maybe kind of change the trajectory of the socioeconomic status being it, because I really do believe that that's probably a big piece of it. And so do we evaluate any of that through coordinated entry? Is that something that we can just kind of add to our presentation of information so that we know what, as a community, what we're dealing with when we're serving the groups that we're serving from a financial standpoint, and what those costs projected out will look like? Rents are going up astronomically in our community. And so the vouchers are going up some, but they're not going up at an equivalent rate as we're seeing the increase on the market.
So yes, we do look at the income of households. And that's done in the performance management committee, and it's done in our evaluations of the projects. One of the things that HUD grades us on is increase in income. Are
Right.
people increasing income?
Right.
And this isn't just a Durham issue, this is kind of across the board. Most people on, as you said, on disability don't increase their income, except for disability usually might increase $1 or $2, a couple bucks here and there from year to year. And that requires, it's not substantially huge amounts of money, but we as a system and we as a continuum should be working on increasing income, helping people get back into the workforce. And yeah, you might lose some or all of your disability benefits, but if you are able to make more money working than you are on the disability, then it would make sense to go make more money working than staying on that 943, if you're able to do so. So that's, yes, we do track it. We have not tracked, I mean, I could go pull a report and give you an idea of how many people called from entry point. The piece is, you can see it's kind of a point in time with income, and you've got to be in a program long enough for people to update income either at entry, interim assessment, or at exit to see whether or not people's incomes have changed. And that's usually an area that people forget to update on a regular basis when income changes. So the data that I would pull from entry point would be, here's what the client self-reported at the time they called entry point. It's not going to show whether, because entry point's job is not to help people increase their income. Entry point Durham is to get people into the system and work through the system and record the universal data elements that HUD requires. And then it's up to emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, street outreach, those types of groups to work on income and income stabilization.
Right. Well, how do we as a system, I mean, we have some systems right now that we use, and we're always trying to get more people on. How do we follow a person through the continuum in a way that even if we have that point in time snapshot from coordinated entry, how do we then track through the process? You know, because there's some people that come into coordinated entry and get PSH and have no income. They might be working with me or some other SOAR worker, and then they get it. You get what I'm saying? So how do we utilize our data that we do have access to follow a person through the continuum so that we can actually have those conversations with HUD when they ask us questions about that, to show the progression? How do we do that? So that's a question that I have. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up would be the supportive services aspect. So yes, we do have PSH and we do have people utilizing PSH, but for the most part, our PSH is just a long-term subsidy. Oftentimes, there is a lack of the supportive services. And I think that this perpetually becomes a problem because you can't have move on if you don't have supportive services. Because that person should be following that person through a process to get them graduated to a next step. You know, ideally, you know, there's going to be a group of people that are always going to need permanent supportive housing, depending on the level of their disabling conditions and how they manifest themselves over time. But there are some people that if they get what they need intensely in a way that's meaningful over time, they actually might be able to transition out. And so how do, without having the supportive services piece in place, which I think is integral, we have some people who can do case management, but it's often very short term. How do we also go back and also generate or create space to have a thriving supportive services service within our continuum for people who we feel like can be rehabilitated to a certain point, but they may not need permanent supportive housing.
So on your first point, Sharita, the question, can we track one person through the system? Yes, we can track one person. We don't have the bandwidth to track 3,000 people on a one by one basis. So we look at the aggregate of how many people fall in these different income categories. And in our reports, you'd be able to see how many people increase their income, how many people decrease their income. I'd have to go look and see if we'd be able to figure out in the increases or lost income, whether or not we could easily pull which clients lost money, which clients increased money. I just can't remember if that's one of the fields that we can click and it pops up all the names who fall into that category or not in the APR. But on the whole, yes, we can track as a system. Are we seeing more people increase? Are we seeing people decrease income as a whole? And this year's HUD NOFO is really putting an emphasis on workforce connections and getting people in the homeless system into the workforce and increasing income. And yes, if people aren't entered into the homeless management information system, then we have no way of tracking any of their data whatsoever. But the reason we have a homeless management information system is to get everybody experiencing homelessness into that system so that we're able to better figure out what's happening in our community and have more robust reports. So that's what we're trying to do in that piece. There was another question you had in there, Sharita, I think, or did I answer it all?
I think I just brought up the issue about tracking over time and then the supportive services thing and how that helps with move on.
So I do want to say the supportive services piece for permanent supportive housing. It's important to understand that HUD's continuum of care permanent supportive housing was developed, I don't even know how long ago, a long time ago. And that permanent supportive housing was originally designed for, so I want to say you had to have a disabling condition and be chronically homeless and had to kind of be able to live independently. So it was sort of a low threshold because the supportive services that HUD paid for was pretty minimal. It was about, a case manager to check on you, maybe an hour a week, not to do intensive case management. HUD was always trying to push people to get connected and use SAMHSA money or Medicaid money or other money for the more in-depth supportive services. Granted, that was pie in the sky thinking years ago. Now we've got Medicaid expansion, which is sort of opening some of those doors up, but not everybody is is able to qualify for the level of support that may be needed to stay in those units. So in order to increase our supportive services, we really need to develop more robust partnerships with behavioral health, physical health partners and providers and payors, because the homeless system and HUD doesn't have the money to pay those very expensive bills the way Medicaid can offset some of those costs. So it's really trying to build the supportive services out. And that's part of the continuum of care. Permanent supportive housing's case manager's role is to try and coordinate all the additional supportive services that a household may need to maintain permanent supportive housing. Now, as we all know, people in permanent supportive housing, depending on the disabling condition, may or may not accept the additional supports and may or may not keep the additional supports for some period of time. And we have no way to force anybody to accept or follow through with any recommendations or continue to accept those additional supportive services if they choose not to. And then your question about when people leave, we look at re-entries. We do a re-entry report. So if people exit these programs and never come back into the Durham homeless system, then we don't have a way of knowing that they became homeless again. So if somebody's in permanent supportive housing for 10 years, they exit permanent supportive housing and stay housed, great, good for them. If they become homeless after 10 years in permanent supportive housing, but choose to not call entry point, then we would not have that data. That's data that we don't have access to because we wouldn't know that they became homeless. We don't track people forever and ever.
Ricky?
Thanks, Sharita. I'm wondering if Ryan can speak to what he posted in the chat about similar data for those we are not able to get into PSH, RRH, and shelter. Ryan, what are you?
Sure.
What
Yeah.
are you thinking?
Well, I was trying to think back to the report that Colin just shared with us, and it was great information. A lot of it was helping us understand, who was in permanent supportive housing and these other programs and equity around that. And I'm just thinking about what do we know about, we know there are people on wait lists, and I'm trying to think about how do we better understand who is on that wait list and who we're not able to serve right now. And that might be a different report. So it was just a general question, and I saw Sharita posed or gave a response, but yeah, just thinking about that piece of what are we not seeing in this report that would be helpful, and just trying to think about that.
And what I'll add to that, Ryan, I think is that is something that I think we will be covering under the next item on our agenda, like our unsheltered response. Like, what else do we do with folks that we are not able to service in these ways, and what do we need to do so that those people are getting some kind of touch, so we can try to help either them resolve it on the backside, or at least get better connected to something that might deliver some benefit to them in their homelessness.
So there is a separate report in the HMIS for folks who call entry point and sort of where and what they're referred to. If you give me a minute, I can run that report and kind of show you what that looks like. And it's so that goes a little bit to the question that you asked, Ryan, as the people, those who are on a wait list, it sort of says referred to another provider. There's some outcomes that are on that piece. So I can run that while we're run that in the background in a few minutes and share that with you. And
Sharita, if I may, sorry, Colin. So Sharita asked if we assume that once people exit rapid housing, permanent supportive housing, do we assume that they stay housed? Bluntly, yeah, unless they come back to our system. If they enter another COC's homeless system, we don't have a way of seeing that. So I think Durham's re-entry rate into the system is typically low. Folks who come through again within 2 years of exiting. But right now, like I'm thinking about the feasibility of being able to track someone, and I've got nothing. I just wanted to answer that.
No, I was just speaking to the financial aspects, the socioeconomic, like, is there a way to track? Like, yes, maybe in that one point in time when coordinated entry sees them, they may have no income. but then they may go into the shelter and get rapid rehousing referred, get a job. You get what I'm saying? Like, so, where CE just sees the person one way, do we have the ability to, like, if we wanted to just do like a tracer on a person, do we have the ability to see that over time? Is that something that we can look at, like, and analyze to see, to determine somehow our effectiveness in helping somebody get to a different place where they maybe can be able to sustain or support themselves in their own housing, just so that we know what's happening, or people just staying flat and nothing changes. You get what I'm saying?
So yes, you could look at one person. You would just have to go file by file, case by case, and look at every interim update and every case manager who ever worked with that client would have had to update income accurately and consistently to be able to show what happened. So if you knew you wanted to check on John Smith, you could go in and look up John Smith and go read every interim assessment and see, oh, what was his income at this point in time? And you could also look and see what service providers have worked with this person over X period of time. We don't have a report that would pull 3,000 people and show 3,000 people on a case, but on a micro level, what their particular piece was. We're able to pull that data on the aggregate to show that we as a system are succeeding because what percentage of people are increasing their income, or we as a system are failing because people are staying flat or losing income. And that's how we have to work, is at that macro level of what's the data showing as a system. And as a system, are we seeing people increase or decrease in exits to permanent housing? Are we seeing people increase or decrease income? Are we seeing people increase or decrease access to Medicaid? So it's a whole lot of folks.
Carlin, if I could interject here, I want us to not lose sight that release of information is good for 1 year. We're allowed to look, but we're not allowed to look beyond when a client says we can look. And I know we have a lot of things that we want to do in the system, but we also don't want to lose sight of client rights. If we want to do that, we're going to have to get clearance from a client. It has to be renewed for each year, because a release of information can't be longer than a year. So if we want to do that, then we need to identify who we want to do it with, and we want to make sure that they have agreed to allow us to do it, or else we're just kind of spinning our wheels here.
That makes sense. I'm sorry. I think we got off off task. So whoever the last person was that we were like in the midst of answering your question and maybe didn't finish, can you repeat it? Thank you, Ricky.
Can I add something? I hate to be contrary on a Monday, but here I am. So the thing about the APRs and the income for folks in permanent supportive housing, when those cost of living adjustments come through, which is pretty much on an annual basis, it does look like, hey, these folks in PSH have increased income, because yes, that is correct, but it isn't substantial. Like, and anyone who works with the PSH population can tell you that. So when we think about strategy and knowing that there definitely is a cliff for our PSH folks to be able to have benefits, and only be able to, like, maybe bring in a certain amount of additional income before their benefits become jeopardized. Is there a way to maybe, I don't know, have a formal partnership with vocational rehab or something where we could, help our folks gain meaningful employment without jeopardizing their benefits, like figuring out a way to do that so that they're not you know, dependent upon this PSH and can maybe, foresee moving on with some other type of subsidy, and we can get more new folks into our PSH projects.
I think that was Ricky. I think that's one of the things that I was like asking when I asked the questions about how to track supportive services, things like that, to help a person navigate a process to safely get them, potentially to some additional income. There are some programs that are out here, but do we need to strategize around that? So that means we would have to do some research to figure out who our people are and be intentionally looking at those things and figuring out who we can pull out of that group who could do that, because that could be part of a move on strategy. Let's see if we can increase your income so that, you could transition from permanent supportive housing and maybe go into, mainstream housing with a voucher or, something else, but get your income up. And so I just think that it's, in many instances, our folks can't do that on their own. They need somebody to help. So, and then you have to know the person, because it might be a person that might be able to give you a spurt of work and then fall apart. And it might be a person that could sustain 10 hours a week over time. So that requires you to actually know the people, know what they can and can't do. You can't just like prescribe for everybody, go increase your income, because there are some people that can't do it. So do we need to do, as a system, do we need to do some intentional work around that, so that we can free up some spaces to be able to house some other people? Because I don't know how much more PSH we're gonna realistically get. I think, our numbers continue to grow. We're a very attractive city, resources are in abundance. It's very attractive, especially for the counties that shelter us, that surround us, that are not as urbanized as we are. And so we have to kind of just like understand like the attractiveness for somebody who lives in Creedmoor, why they would want to be in Durham. They can get on a bus, they can get to the hospital, they can get to a pharmacy, they can access a resource. It might be money at DSS, they can get them in some housing really quick, some financial assistance. They may not have that robust of a program in their community. We look like the best thing for them. So we also have to understand our attractiveness to people outside of our community. Are we done on this, or we still need to talk through this a little bit more? Again, Colin, I thank you for the report. Just some things to think about. And I think, even from an executive committee standpoint, I think in the past we have spoken about the need to strategically plan and figure out the gaps and where we're going. Like, we have these goals and we have these missions, but things are changing. Our homeless population is getting older. It requires a different kind of strategy, because the person 10 years ago that was in the shelter looks very different from the person now, especially those people have been homeless the whole entire time. Homelessness is debilitating. It impacts people's mental, physical, emotional health in ways that, are significant and profound. So we need to create some space where we can look at this stuff to try to figure out what we can do or what we need, so that when city and county government come, or some wealthy private benefactor decides they want to give us some money, we already know what we need. So what is 11:40? Our meeting goes to when, Colin? Is it over?
No, it goes to
it's
12
12.
o'clock. We got 20 minutes.
Got 20 minutes. Yep.
So as promised, if nobody has any additional questions, I wanted to bring up this topic, and we may need to revisit this in the beginning of next month's meeting. our unsheltered response. I think we've had some conversations in the past about serving those people. How do we serve those people we can't serve because they can't get access? We've talked about prioritizing folks' access into shelter to try to kind of have a mixture of people who can resolve quickly with just a little light touch, and not just having like the most highest needs people in the shelter, because then it prevents these other people from getting into the shelter. And then recently we had a project proposal that came through that we were not able to fund, that kind of brought up, I think, a great strategy that we're seeing some of our comparable cities and towns that look like us in North Carolina. They're moving to some other kinds of ways to serve people unsheltered. And so I think that this is a worthwhile conversation. I imagine Hart encounters lots of people who are just waiting out there based on what Ryan, the questions that Ryan had today. And so I wanted us to have some conversation about our unsheltered population, you know, what we have, what we need, what we can imagine, thinking outside of the box of how we serve those people who can't get access or get into the doors right now. So I don't know who wants to start, but that's my opening for this discussion. And you can rate up. Ryan's hand is up. Ryan.
Thank you. I'm excited for this conversation. I'll keep my remarks brief. So, you know, from Hart's perspective, as responders who are engaging a lot with our unsheltered neighbors. So one, we don't have enough shelter. Just the fact, and you all know it, it's clear from the report, 96 people are waiting to get into shelter today. We also don't have, we need different kinds of shelter. We primarily only have congregate shelter, and this is creating real barriers. We don't have shelter for someone who might have an animal. We don't have easy shelter for people to stay together as couples, which Colin reported on. There's a whole bunch of barriers. I think there are some things that we could do, that we could begin trying to do to pilot some new approaches to see what might work. There's 3 specific things that I would love for this group to work on and love to be able to talk about more next month. One is considering a pallet village. This is something that Greensboro does, other cities across the country are doing, which are providing individual units for people that have their own heating and air conditioning, lighting, their own door. This could be great for neighbors who may be experiencing severe persistent mental illness, who may not feel safe or comfortable going into a congregate shelter, for neighbors who have animals or other types of barriers. I think we could do something there to expand that. I want to support what I believe was the proposal brought forward by Open Table Ministries for a safe parking program. This is something that we're seeing other cities do around a response to vehicular homelessness, how to create safer spaces for families and others who may be living out of their car, to do that in a way that they feel safe, in a way that they're not being asked to move by law enforcement, in a way that we know where they're at and can work to continue to support them. And the final thing that's really related to Pallet Village is, I think we need to consider a safe sleeping program, and consider a role for providing tents for people who may choose to remain outdoors. I understand one thing, I think that all this is consistent with a strong commitment to housing first. I think that we can continue, we need to push as a group for more supportive housing, more rapid rehousing. We know that's going to take time. Our needs are growing. And I'm really concerned about what can we do today to reduce harm and provide better dignity and safety for our neighbors who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness right now. And I think these are 3 things that we could begin to do. And I think we could begin to do them in the next 12 months and learn about them and learn what works here. So that's what I want to, I guess, ask this group to consider. And I had some initial conversations with Housing for New Hope and Opal Taven Ministries and some others about multiple of these, and would be, I think, happy to work with the group and bring a proposal back to this group to weigh in on and provide input. I do think there's funding out there. I think some opioid settlement dollars could be used for this that the city has. There may be some leftover ARPA dollars that could be available. I've had conversations with Alliance Health. They might be interested in supporting some of these pilots. So I think it's about putting together a proposal of something we feel like we could support and seeing what we can make happen. And, you know, I guess the last thing I'll say is, our department was asked recently to stop giving out tents, which we have done. And I would love for this group to weigh in on their thoughts on whether or not tents should be a part of something that HART is able to do. And I know that the manager has asked there to be a formal policy put in place around that. And I imagine that would be something that HSAC would be involved in advising and thinking about. I wish we didn't need to pass out tents, but we encounter people and we have no other shelter option. We just don't have any place to take them. And so, yeah. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Drew, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I think Ryan really covered a majority of it. I apologize that I wasn't able to be on last month's meeting. Similar to Ryan's point, the safe parking project that we proposed was similar to what Greensboro has done. I know a number of us were at the Bringing It Home North Carolina conference. I think that was in May or June of this year. And that's really where that idea came from. It was a ESG funded project that they led in Greensboro. But yeah, just trying to promote some innovative ideas and solutions to support folks who might not head to our congregate shelters, and perhaps even take some of the pressure off of congregate shelters and make sure that folks who want to utilize those services can. So just thinking about alternative solutions for emergency shelter.
Does anybody else have anything they want to share regarding this?
This is Heidi. I do. I'm so excited about these 3 possible pilot suggestions for how we as a system deal with the fact that we have too many unhoused residents and we don't have enough emergency shelter. And Ryan made really good points about the type of emergency shelter we have is not shelter that everyone feels comfortable with and can't use, too many barriers for them. And we've mentioned in these meetings before this pallet housing idea, the pallet village. I didn't know there was one in Greensboro. I've read it about it, but in other places, and sort of thought it was out of reach. So it's great to hear someone bring this forward as a real possibility. I also was not aware, maybe I probably should have been, of the vehicular homelessness and how that people are putting into place safe spaces within parking lots for those individuals. This feels very hopeful to me, this discussion. It provides options that I really think we need to explore. And I love the idea of having a team come back to us with a proposal for how to move forward with some pilots.
So I think that this conversation, because I think I know when we had to discuss this matter in one of our executive committee meetings, all of the leadership of the executive team was very we were very torn by the position that we were in to not move forward on it, because we all believe that something needs to happen, which is why I committed to bring it to this group. And so in doing that, my hope was to see if we could create an ad hoc working group to work on some of this stuff. And I think from the feedback you that we gave you, Drew, in the response to your appeal, I think those are like the big things that we need to look at, like the space, safety, those things like that, and trying to figure out robustly how we can get those things covered, how we can get city and county leadership to support such an effort, because I imagine a parking lot might end up having to be a city county parking lot if it comes to be more, primarily before any private organization steps up. It might require city county like giving us space. And so I think those are the big hurdles to kind of focus on. But the leadership definitely believes that we need to have some of these things in place for our folks that we're not serving in the shelter for whatever reason it is, because they deserve and need services too, and they may be able to get help right there in those parking lots that can change the trajectory of their housing livelihood. So I don't know. So do we I think we have to vote that the ad hoc committee in to officially bring it forth as something that policy and planning would like to see happen. And then we need folks who are interested to kind of give their interest, recruit other people who are interested for us to move it forward. And then the hope would be that that group would then come back and report to policy and planning the work they've done. So that's where we are.
So
So
Sharita, can you clarify,
Sure.
The purpose of the ad hoc committee would be
to actually do the work around developing, coming up with the plan, the pilot, maybe even researching some financial opportunities that we can use. Sounds like Ryan has already been looking at some of this stuff and kind of come back to us to talk about maybe the pieces that they are struggling with, so we can try to figure out as an entire HSAC how we then lend our voice to this effort in hopes of making something happen. Abena?
I wanted to add to this conversation, whether it's the pallet, the parking lots, tents, or whatever other suggestions come forth, if there could be some movement towards utilizing one of these alternative housing options for the wintertime in conjunction with the emergency shelters. It's nippy outside, and we know in a month or 2 months, it's going to be cold again here in North Carolina. And I see that we continue to move on a similar path of coming up with ideas. And when the cold weather hits, we're faced again with, we have 5 families that are still unsheltered, or we have 10, individuals that are unsheltered. Where are they going to go? And now the tents have been taken off of the table.
Right.
What are we going to do for our unsheltered neighbors? It's literally going to be fall next week. So I wanted to highlight that and put that on the table as part of this conversation.
And so historically, Abena, this has been a conversation that that at one point we were only talking about it when it got ready to get cold. And then in the last 2 or 3 years, we've talked about a plan for winter shelter year round, because we do realize that we always get up to the wire and then, it's time and we don't have the greatest plan. We just have the plan that we have, right? And we already know it's inadequate and it has gaps and holes and all kinds of complexities in it. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Yep, it's getting cold. We're in the same place. I think. Go ahead.
If I can interject, I think and Abner, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that the issue with the tents could theoretically be separate, because that's something that's already in play. I would hate for that to go into committee with the other 2 items and come out as a blanket plan that we talk about in February. So I think that that could we separate those things and maybe not wait, because I think there's already some processes in place around the tent policy. So could we separate that and then have committee to work on the other things? If I'm not mistaken, there's already some conversation. There's already some things moving forward with that. So can we keep that separate?
Sure.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, because I think I was understanding there's a tent policy already in the works. Is that correct? I would hate for that not to get held up in that meeting.
Right.
But if we still need, if tents is something that comes, because we don't have to reserve our plan to just the parking lot and the pallets. It can be whatever it is that we, that the group thinks are things that we should be doing, investing in to serve our unsheltered folks. It's not limited to that. I just know that those are things that have come up, and people are already trying to figure out how to get it done. And we just need to kind of perfect that plan, and get it in place. And so tents might be a part of it, but I I think that the tent policy that is currently in progress, it needs to go ahead and be flushed out so that we don't have any problems. Just like years ago when we did the whole panhandling policy, it just needs to go forward.
One thing that would be really helpful is part of the policy and planning committee's job is prioritizing uses of funds. And I'm hearing everything is a priority: rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, non-congregate shelter, pallet homes, safe parking lot. And what is the priority? Oh, and white flag. Which of these needs to be the priority first? So we can really try and say, okay, we're going to do this, because part of our challenge is everything's a priority. So we just spend our time playing whack-a-mole from priority to priority. And it's like, oh, the priority is this month. Okay, we start going that way. Oh, now we got to jump over here. It's like, let's set some priorities and say, hey, if $1 million, and I'm just throwing out a number, I don't know that there's any money available, but if $1 million magically became available today and you could only put it in one project, what project would you put it in? Like, I think that's where we need to get to, is what are our priorities? And let's start methodically working through step by step. Here's what we need to tackle first. Then we need to tackle this. Then we need to tackle this. Otherwise, we're just going to keep chasing our tails.
But I think that the challenge is the current way that we do things, we leave this whole group of people, and that group of people is continuing to grow to an alarming number. Like, I remember when our family's number would get to 20 and we would be freaking out. We've gotten so desensitized to that. Now we got 35 families and 35 at risk. And it's just like, oh, we're just not going to worry about it. That population of our neighbors needs the same type of service as the other people that we're working on from a PSH perspective and rapid rehousing.
Right.
We have to, because the longer a person stays homeless, it destroys their ability to jump back into the game and go on with their lives. You know, it brings in health complications and all kinds of things that get ignored because people are trying to survive. We have to have a response for this group because it's getting out of control, and it's only going to get worse because we get ready to hit those winter months and people are going to be outside. And I just don't want us to get comfortable seeing those numbers be so high and do nothing. So I think that it is important because we have put decades of energy into PSH and rapid rehousing. This group is just as important. We can't keep ignoring it. It's going to turn into a monster. And in my opinion, is already a monster because we've been focusing so hard on the front end. So I think we need to have a tiered out kind of way, tiered out resource. I don't know, what's the word? Kind of the way we deal with people in all these different categories. You know, so it's important. It's important. The numbers are astounding. Ebony's numbers that I hear about are astounding. Like, I mean, this thing is a beast and we got to do something. We can't keep just saying we're going to funnel all the energy to the top. We gotta hit these groups.
I think the tents are low-hanging fruit, so that should be our first move. That's low-hanging fruit. We've already had something in place before. We're trying to get a policy together now. So if we could be looking at a timeline to try and move with that, and then have the other things in committee as we devise how we move forward with the strategy. Pallets are going to take time. Getting a parking lot and getting all of the infrastructure in place for the safe parking is going to take a little time, but the tents we should be able to effectively do in a relatively short amount of time. It is about to get cold. It was cold this morning, so we don't have long. We don't have long, and it's not something that we can tarry on and send back and forth into committee.
I would just highlight too something that Jeff and Anthony have been saying in our TA site visits when they come up, is that we're a very resource-rich community, and I would just implore this committee to act like that and to have that imagination, that if we see a need, let's say something. Like, I just think we have to have that imagination. Like, if our committee isn't going to have it, who is. Like, we just have to have that bold approach. Because, Colin, to your point, theoretically $1 million, there's $2 million in county funding being released, this evening. Like, let's be bold. Like, let's take some leadership, because folks in our community look to this group, they look to the HSAC, and they look to us specifically for that guidance. So I would just implore the group to take that stance.
So you guys, it is 12. So technically our meeting is over, but we need to definitely go ahead, and I need a motion to approve the ad hoc group to work on our unsheltered response plan more robustly. And I will take a motion in a second so we can move that forward. And then if we don't have any other items pressing, we can end our meeting for today.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, I have a motion by Heidi Carter. Commissioner Carter.
A second.
Who was that?
All of us.
Myself and Colleen.
Okay, all
And
right.
Helen and Drew.
All right, so we have an ad hoc committee, and I'm assuming that includes hard representation and open table ministry right now, but can, and I don't know who's taking the lead, whether it's gonna be Ryan or Drew, but can somebody just kind of let us know who the membership is via
Drew and I could
email?
tag team it. If Drew's open, we could co-chair it. Drew, you open for that?
Absolutely.
All right.
I'm sorry, can we go back? I just missed that part, Ryan. And also I was gonna ask if there are people here that obviously want to participate, if you could show us who you are so we know to list you as a member of this ad hoc committee. So you could raise your hand, or
So I see Colleen,
okay.
Jeff,
I see Sally.
Helen, Ebony. Can we also send out a communication to the full HSAC that this ad hoc committee is there, and that if folks are interested, they could join? Because I mean, I think this is a very important thing, a matter, and I think that we have other people in our group that might be interested in lending their voice to it. So I don't know, just kind of within the walls of HSAC, at least let them know that this was something that moved forward. And then Drew and Ryan will defer to you as far as when that meeting will take place. I'm gonna say I would like to attend the meetings. I don't know if I necessarily want to have a seat at the table where just because I have a ton of obligations right now. But I know you guys is hard, and I know that you're very committed to doing this work. So
There are 3 hands up, Sharita, people who have interest, the Melva, Sally.
Nicole, Sally, and Melva. Anthony.
Okay, so I have Colleen, Jeff, Sally, Helen, Ebony, Melba, and Nicole to start. And then
Allison.
Ryan and Drew is a comment I missed. Ryan, you said yes, and
I said, I think Drew and I both nodded yes to co-chairing this working group. And Anthony, we could work with you on getting an email out to coordinate bringing people together if we want to extend it to other people on HSAC. So let me know. We can follow up on how best to.
the only thing I would suggest is our HSAC list is probably 60+ people or more. And so you kind of want to have an idea maybe how big you want this committee to get, just so that the work is focused. So you might want 10 people, but you might not want 30 people. So just something to think about as you move forward.
Evelyn says add her and Allison Steele.
Madam Chair, this is Russ. Sorry, I've been in and out of the meeting due to another obligation. Just 3 things. One, it may be good to do an assessment of how many representatives you have from different organizations. And I also know that you're always a very strong advocate for people with lived experience being part of it. I don't know that I've heard that named.
Allison Steele.
Okay,
Allison
thank you.
Steele.
Sorry. But I know that's always an important piece for you.
Maybe she's not. She might not be lived experience.
And for
Allison, are
us.
you lived experience? She's downtown resident. But no, I think that's great. So if somebody from lived experience, especially Anthony and Jeffrey, that you think might be interested in this, I think that's a great idea. Did I miss anybody?
And we'll make sure to have somebody from H&H. It likely won't be me, but somebody closer to the ground.
And so a representative from H&H. All right, all. Any additional questions? Hi, Angela. I will entertain the motion to adjourn our meeting.
Wait a minute. Hello,
Hi,
can you hear me?
I
Hi,
can.
what you need, sweetie?
Nothing, I was just saying hello because you weren't in when I was talking earlier in the beginning
Yeah,
of the meeting. That's all.
yeah, okay.
All right. You guys have a great, great week.
Can you stay on for a minute? And
For
Jeffrey,
me, Angela?
Anthony,
Yes.
you, I guess.
Keisha, don't end the meeting. You can stop the recording, but don't end the meeting.
I'm trying to start recording now. Give me a second.
And if you needed an official move, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Oh, there's my official move by Ms. Colleen Herbert to adjourn our meeting. Can I get a second?
Second,
I think the adjourn happened with the other 10 people.
Logged out. Oh, everybody's
They're already
gone.
gone.
Is everybody gone?
We're the last one standing.
So Angela, did you need me to stay on or you just wanted Anthony to stay on?
well, this is regarding the minutes, but first I want to say thank you all for your condolences for my dad during that time. Okay. About the
Hold on a
minutes,
minute,
I didn't
Angela.
get the one.
I'm trying to stop the recording, Anthony, but it won't. It's not giving me the option.
Okay, why don't we hang up and Angela, you can just call me, and if we need to add on anybody, if you just need to talk minutes, I can do that with you and not everybody else needs to do it.
Okay, yeah, that's what I need to talk about.
Okay, so I'll call you
All right.
back right now.
All right.
Okay.
I'll take care.
Thank you, everybody.